And go live. Good morning. I'm always rushing. I plan this like a long way in advance now because it's now a regular thing at this time because I'm trying to have routine and be organized. But somehow, even though I've planned it well in advance, we're rushing. There's always stuff to do. Hey, George, thanks for joining. I was thinking actually, so there's multiple things I didn't put in the list of stuff to talk about today. Normally I keep a little bit of a running tally. Why are my lights so bright? Whilst I jump into Home Assistant, which we'll talk about in a moment, and try and adjust these lights. You'd think I could automate this, wouldn't you? I do automate it. I've worked out the nicest lighting situation for my office, once it's dark and I'm working, is to actually have the key lights on, but to have them really warm and really low. But unfortunately, my automation to turn them back on to like recording mode just doesn't actually reset those. That's a bit better. Jeez. I feel like I'm outside on a Gold Coast day. Also, it's August. If you're from another part of the world and it's not yet August, we are now in August, last month of our winter. Summer, well, spring is in sight, which is good. Aaron's here. John, g'day. Oh yeah, Aaron, you got a crown. Well done, man. Apparently you're number one at the moment too. James, can't wait for Troy to give us the tea. Oh, geez, yeah, we'll talk about that. On that topic, not that topic, but the topic I was just talking about before I started mucking around with my lights, about always things to do. One of the things I didn't put in there, actually, here's the two things I didn't put on the list. We're going to talk about the pie hole, because that came up yesterday, my favorite blocker of nasty things on the network. I'm going to put that at the end. And also 3D printing. So I didn't mention this, but it's on my X feed. I don't know who's still there, if I'm honest. Weird randos. And me. Maybe I'm one of them. Anyway, on the X feed, our 3D printer, beloved 3D printer, Prusa printer. I'm going to put my daughter in this as well. So Al and I bought a Mark IV's 3D printer, which we did a big build thread on earlier last year. Went to Norway, spoke about 3D printing at NDC Oslo, which was super cool. There's a video out there. And this has been a thing for her. So she was 11 when she came up on stage with me in Oslo and did this talk, which I'm enormously proud of because she did a great job and really loved it. And the really cool thing about an 11-year-old girl doing a really cool engineering project like building a 3D printer is she doesn't yet know about this thing in our industry where it's a very male-biased thing, and she just doesn't even think about it. And it's cool, and I don't want to mention it because I don't want to create this little stigma thing around it, but it's so cool that either of the kids do this. But I think it's just something extra cool about a young girl genuinely wanting to do the engineering thing, and not because she's been pushed into it or anything like that, but she just seems to really, really love it. So what we're doing is we're taking the Mark IV's, which we built earlier last year. She's 13 now, a bit more mature, and we're converting that into a Prusa Core 1. So there's an upgrade kit. Now, you can go and buy any of these printers just off the shelf, and it's pre-built and it works straight away and it's awesome. But if you buy the kit, not only is it cheaper, but you get to build the whole thing yourself, and it is like the coolest Lego kit ever. I mean, a 3D printer is such an accurate, intricate thing, and you get to build it all. So in order to build the Core 1, you have to firstly disassemble the Mark IV's. And there's instructions to do this. And she just spent, hours the other day sitting there pulling apart motors, belts, circuit boards, the PSU, like all of this stuff. And we've just now begun the process of rebuilding that into a Core S. And I am absolutely loving this process. Aaron, send me a Twitter DM with some recommendations of high-end smart lock brands. All the security over data keys. I tell you what, Aaron, if you want a really good challenge for finding me a lock, see if you can find a smart lock for a sliding door. Now, the last time I looked at this, which was, I feel like only months ago, the consensus from everyone was that they were just not smart locks for sliding doors. And it's wild. I use these locks so much. So, for example, the locks we have at home, we have two of the Yale smart locks, Yale Assure. And they're the least bad ones I could find. I think that's probably the right way to put it. They're the least bad insofar as they look good. They have both PIN and obviously IoT. No key, which is great. I'm fine with that. They're from Yale, and this is one of my points, Aaron, where I didn't know that I really wanted a technology company making locks. Like I've seen some of the things technology companies make, and I felt better with a lock maker making a smart lock. Now, the only thing my Yale doesn't have, which I'd really, really like to have, is Apple Home Key. That's where you can just like tap your watch on it without even pressing buttons or so on. It's not IoT. It uses the NFC and it just opens it and lets you in. Our locks don't have that, which bugs me. There is a Yale version that does have them, and they came out after we got these. So we're doing a bunch of reno works and things now. Somewhere next year, we need to make decisions about locks again. And I'm just hoping that Yale comes out with something that, first of all, they sell in the Australian market. Even these ones we had to buy from the US, been fine. And secondly, I don't know, maybe make the battery life run a little bit longer. But we have automations for things like if we're going to bed, there's one button, puts the house into going to bed mode, and it checks every single lock and every single door, garage door, carport door. And if everything's not closed, then the watch speaks and the Sonos speaks as well. And it says, look, something's not closed. I'd love that for sliding doors. And we don't have that. And every now and then we leave a sliding door unlocked. The other day we were walking around the corner here and a very nice house had the sliding gate in front of their garage had a big dent. A big dent from the inside. And as Charlotte and I walked past, we're like, did someone like ram the car out of there? Like it looks like a car's been ran out of there, but did someone do it because they're stealing it, or did someone accidentally have it in reverse when they thought they got like something like that? As we walked back, there was a police car there, so the answer was obvious, and spoke to the owner. And people, it's on the water. People had come up from the water side on paddle boards and found a door with a dodgy lock and gone into the house and taken the keys. And then just rammed the car out. And it would have been kids because then they've just dumped it around the corner. Point being is I really, really love the ability of automation to just look at all your locks and make sure that everything's closed properly. Because every time we have any sort of IRL security incident here, it's low-hanging fruit. It's a dodgy lock. It's a door not locked at all. It's a door left open. I got to the point, particularly when there was a bit of spate of, like, again, just dumb youth crime, where we've got automations where if the door is not locked for a period of, I think, 15 minutes, then it starts whinging. Like the Sonos starts whinging and the watch starts whinging. So close the door, lock the door. I like that. We need smart locks to be able to do that. John says forgot the name, but there used to be, still is a Windows app that yellowed your screen alongside hue lamps as the sun set. Interesting. I'm not sure what I think of that. I think this change. It's a little bit like when you can put an iOS device in night mode, where it starts, it's meant to be better for your eyes because there's this blue light, whatever they call it. And every time I've used that, I'm like, it just looks shit. Now that's my worry, and particularly when you're designing stuff where accurate color is important. I used to have, and I've lost it now. I don't know where it is. One of these screen calibration tools. It's a USB cable, and then it hangs down on the screen, and it detects the colors, and then it changes your calibration. I should get another one of those. What else we got in here? If we jump into the meat of it. James likes Ender printers. You can modify them endlessly. You don't get that with Bamboo. So I suspect Ender, Bamboo, and Prusa are the three front runners there. Now, why do we end up with Prusa? Originally, because a mate of mine put me into it, and he said it was a good idea. And then I realized that Prusa is very, very much, I guess, our sort of people. It's an open, very very open organization. I think a lot of what they've built is open source. You can go and build your own printer from all the parts, but that doesn't make it like a maker world where everything's very manual. I mean, they're beautifully built machines. And then I got to know the founder, Joseph Prusa, reasonably well when I visited him in Prague as well. And it's just a cool company, cool people. And I just get a very different sense from Bamboo. Maybe partly because they're Chinese as well. And inevitably, you're not going to have the same, I don't know, like involvement in our circles of community for Chinese companies as you do from someone in the Czech Republic. Ender I've really not seen much of. But definitely Prusa. Big thumbs up for Prusa. Joel is getting close to the Australian magpie season. Yeah, if you have not heard about Australian magpie season, Google that. It's horrifying. Everything here is going to kill you. Now, what was on my list? What was the last comment here, actually? Jay, I got to ask Mark Webber Tobias about a lock he opened with a hairdryer. It turns out it was made by software engineers. I'd hate to have to design a lock. I think it'd be like a physical security person trying to design a secure software product. I think we'd both screw that up terribly in the other person's domain. And says, look at Lockwood, Australian, owned by Assa Abloy. And now, incidentally, the Yao ones are owned by Assa Abloy as well, and I ended up speaking to some people there. You can use a DOM tap key Euro cylinder for sliding door. I think what you're talking about there is one of effectively the bolts that just go into the floor, right? Euro cylinder for smart locks. Send me a link by the DM maybe. You can't put it here on the YouTube because they block that because it's spammy. James says Bamboo is heading in a crap direction. Yeah. Anyway, we will see. What was on the list? Spilling the tea. Now, get comfortable. This one's wild. So, I had not heard of the tea app. And I'm going to try and be objective here. We'll see. But spinning down to my thread on this, let's just see how the tea, what's even the address? Tea, or is it Spill the Tea? I think it's like spillthetea.com or something like that. Inevitably, there is an app. Spill the Tea. No, that's a GoDaddy part domain. Spill the Tea app website. You ever find these days, when you Google for something, you very often, I actually did find the right result here. Look at that. teaforwomen.com. I was going to say, so often you Google for something, you just get a clusterfuck of like ads and spam and junk. And what you want is not there. So then you go to ChatGPT and suddenly you have the answer immediately. It makes me wonder how they're surviving. I think usage has gone way down, hasn't it, of the Google. Dating safety tool that protect women. Dating safety tools that protect women. Join 6.2 million women for free. Use T to find verified green flag men, run background checks, identify potential catfish, verify he's not a sex offender. That's important in a relationship. Check for a criminal history. Now, I have never been involved in an online dating scene, and I've never been a woman. So there are probably aspects of this I don't understand. And I'm sure that people would point that out very quickly as I start providing commentary on this. But ostensibly, this service is around safety for women to ensure that the men that they are dating, per the website here, are not sex offenders, run background checks on them, because obviously safety, especially for women in a dating situation, is a very important issue. And I think that bit is okay. What this seems to have descended into, though, I can't use the app because I am not of correct gender. I'm sure that it would not be hard to get in, but we'll do the right thing and not do that. I haven't got Charlotte to use the app just for my research purposes either. But this is all around, ostensibly, so as represented, to protect women in dating scenarios. What seems to often be the case with this service is, I'll explain one more bit first, and then I'll explain the way my 13-year-old daughter explained it. There's one more bit here, which is where women can sort of make sure they're not dating the same guy. Sounds like a lot of hard work, doesn't it? If you're the guy or the woman, imagine having multiple relationships at a time. Crikey. Anyway, make sure you're not dating the same guy. You can upload photos of the guy. You can then anonymously have conversations about the guy. And as I explain this to Elle, she's like, so people are just uploading photos of other people without their consent and gossiping about them. So yeah, that seems to be one of the things that's happening. Now, because it's the internet, and because a lot of this, data breach-wise, has ended up on 4chan, which has got its own all sorts of problems, it's very hard to know what is actually true because everyone's got massive biases one way or the other. But that said, it does seem to be true that there is the non-consensual uploading of photos that, I mean, let's just put it exactly as it is with genders here, of women dating men, uploading their photos without consent and gossiping about them. And of course, some of it is very negative. Some of it, there is language used which, were we to take away or reverse the gender situation, people would find very abhorrent. And again, we're sort of basing this on the information that's floated up because I can't use the site myself. But a lot of it seems to be around men, conversations about anything from their behavior in the relationship through to their anatomy. And you can imagine, right? Like, use your imagination with this. It feels icky from the outset. However, obviously there's a market there, and it got a lot of traction. And it got very, very big in the news. Now, I had not heard about it until the breach, but it was like literally the day before the breach. Where are we talking about now? This was 26 July by my clock, because I got up and there's just like stuff everywhere around tea. I think this was actually, so this was my Saturday morning. So we're 6 days ago now, just after I did this last live stream. So obviously it's gotten massively popular, talking about huge number of downloads, huge amount of usage. And one of the things that is done in this app is, obviously it's meant to be for women. The term they use, which is a term I vehemently dislike for various reasons, is around safe space. There's a safe space. You got to be a woman to come in here. We're going to do verification that you are a woman. And that verification, at least at some time, I believe it changed somewhere along the way, but that verification is uploading a selfie and or a photo of your ID. What could go wrong? Now, Aaron, yes, Twitter is okay for links. So you got all these women uploading photos of their ID to prove who they are, to come to a safe space, to then upload photos, non-consensual photos of men, and at least in part gossip about them. Now, folks on 4chan have discovered that all of these photos, was it a Firebase database? They're sitting in a modern internet-y database, and they're accessible without any form of authentication to the public. And obviously someone has figured out how to, in fact, here's the code. Let's go through the code together. Let's do this. Let's do a chat GPT here. Let's copy this image. This is in my, let's all play along at home. I will drop you into the thread, into the chat here in YouTube, the thread from this conversation. Copy image. Now let's go over to chat GPT. For all of the hype and bullshit about AI, I am using it really extensively lately. Explain this code in layman's terms, because that comes across a little bit better in the live stream. But having a bit of a look at this, it is looping through a set of items, which appears to be some JSON. And then for each one of those, it's looking for attachments in a path. Okay, sort for a couple of seconds. Imagine you have a big online folder full of pictures or attachments, and you want to download them all, 10 or a time, thanks chat, until you've grabbed every single one. Here's roughly what the script does step by step in everyday language. Get ready on your computer. You pick an output folder, ask the server for files page by page, look at each item returned, save the new ones to your computer, move on to the next in the batch. It just enumerates. It enumerates a set of images which are publicly facing without any authorization on them. And the code is like, how many lines of code we got here? Probably 24 lines of code. Like it's ridiculously stupid. And it could definitely be smaller too. So this is just wild how simple it was to go and grab this data. Now, let's talk about where it all starts to turn into an absolute shit fight here. People have gone and grabbed all of these images of women, the women who have verified their identities, or at least verified their gender, to access this service. Now, again, we've sort of got this situation where I'm sure that there is a spread between people going on there just trying to figure out whether the guy they're dating is either like a pedophile or a criminal. I can understand. I don't know. Well, okay, we don't want pedos and criminals, being clear about that. I just don't know how I feel about all of this like background check stuff going. Anyway, again, I'm not in that scene. So these folks uploaded their personal information photo in order to then potentially see personal information about other people and then possibly upload their data without consent. And now the data of the people wanting to do that has been published without their consent. Big torrent going around, 50-something gigabytes worth of photos of the women. Tens of thousands of photos in this corpus. And the problem gets worse and worse from there because, and I'm going off the top of my head here, and then we'll go back through the thread. A bunch of the photos that were uploaded still had all the metadata. The metadata wasn't scrubbed, so it's got the geolocation. And people very, very quickly created a map. There's a map of the US with all the little dots of where people are. Now, I was really careful in this thread not to include any tweets that had, I think there might be one there that has some photos that were fairly publicly circulated, but I didn't want to then redistribute, even if it's there on the public timeline. I didn't want on my public timeline photos of anyone who didn't consent to that data being redistributed. But people were creating things like a map. There's one there of the US with the spread of people around them based on the geolocation data in the photos. People found there were photos of women in things like military facilities. And there's one there in particular, so literally an Air Force base with the pin on it. This is the geolocation. Because people were uploading IDs, some of them inevitably were things like there was one that was circulating around a lot, which was a woman in Department of Defense. And it's her Department of Defense ID. It was just her photo and like Department of Defense or whatever military facility it was on top of that. And that's been uploaded. And of course, there's just multiple layers of concern here and risk to the individuals who'd uploaded their photos because you're able to then, by their photo, geolocate them in some particular position. There is obviously the risk that that photo could be reverse searched, and now you get to find other instances of them and get to match an identity to that, particularly if it then locates them or puts them at a place of work. That's a risk. Tea spilled everywhere. It's a mess. Let's go through what's here on this thread. So that was the, in fact, the next image I have here on the thread was that one of the geolocation. And look, like any data breach, people start absolutely pulling the thing to pieces. They're going through looking at every attribute you possibly can, learning all sorts of stuff from it, publishing it all online. 4chan being 4chan, a lot of this stuff just gets published all over the place because no one there seems to give a shit about privacy and everything else. Right, as we're going through this thread, yeah, I mean, there's a comment here from one of the news stories. Users could, this is legitimate users of the T app, users could find themselves in legal hot water if they publish defamatory posts about men online. And worse, when this information is out there, it could lead to huge impact on the mental health of those who could feel they are unfairly accused. And this is, to be honest, one of the big issues I have. If you create what inevitably was not a safe space. Let's put that out there. As much, again, I dislike that term, but clearly from the InfoSec context, that was the incorrect term to use. I dislike the idea that you can create a community where you can have the non-consensual sharing of photos and defamatory discussions about individuals. That does not feel like a healthy place, and it was enormously popular because you could do that. The excuses from T has not done a good job of handling this. We're going to talk about another incident like that when we get to the Pi hole. Pi hole's great; love those guys, but the WordPress plugin not so much. So excuses from T. Now, keeping in mind their remit here, if you look at this from a purely functional perspective, their remit is to have a sufficient degree of confidence that the people using the service are women. Incidentally, a lot of the photos, not a lot, but there are many photos in that corpus that are men. Now, I don't know if they're just trying it on to see if they could get in or if it was, yeah, who knows. But clearly, their goal here is to make sure it is women. Now, to the best of my understanding, there is no legal obligation to make sure it is women. That is just simply the demographic they're targeting for the platform. However, in here, they've said, we recently discovered unauthorized access to an old archive system that stored about 72,000 user-submitted images, including approximately 13,000 images of selfies and photo identification submitted during account verification, and 59,000 images publicly viewable in the app from post, comments, and direct messages over 2 years. The data was stored to meet law enforcement standards around cyberbullying prevention. Now, I'm calling bullshit on that. And I put this in that tweet, and I never got a reply, or certainly never had anyone able to find an answer to it. But what law enforcement standard is there to prevent cyberbullying that requires people to upload selfies of themselves? Now, maybe they're making the argument here around identity. I don't know, like, many social media platforms by design allow you to not have to expressly identify yourself. I mean, this is one of the hot topics in the world at the moment, isn't it? Identity verification. That just doesn't pass the test for me. Look at some of the comments here. Here we go. Jake says, very vibe coding feel. Everyone wants to blame everything on vibe coding now. Before we had that term, and I would say we did not have that term before this year, certainly not in broad circulation. Before we had that term, we had lots of stupid data breaches. Like, people have been doing dumb shit for years. It's not just AI, which is doing it. And I was thinking about this morning. Arguably, as yet, I have not seen an uptick in data breaches or this sort of vulnerability since we saw AI gain so much prominence in software development. I don't think, given where the bar sits for human-written code, that computer-written code is necessarily any worse. It's a little bit like self-driving cars, right? I was having a discussion with a friend last night. I was talking about Waymos in San Francisco. The bar for a robot to drive a car better than a human is not high. We've all seen humans drive cars before. It is not a high bar. And I would argue it's the same for coding. Jake says S3 default bucket policy strikes again. Yeah, I think this was Firebase, but yeah, same. Yeah, easy to spin up, insecurely. This is on here. James says, if the guy really is a creep and the lady's home address are out there, stalking is a real possibility. This could get much worse. I do wonder, like, thinking through it logically, like this is obviously a major privacy issue. I'm trying to think in a scenario where you might be in a relationship with someone, and to your point here, James, you're in a relationship with someone, clearly you already have physical interaction, I assume. Of course, there's some online relationships, but let's say for the most part, you have physical interactions. They almost certainly know where you live. You have probably been to each other's house. We know how relationships work. Is there really anything more leaked from this that makes that scenario riskier. I think it is more the aggregate of a large amount of data now available to people who you are not in an intimate relationship with. I think that's more of the risk. All right, I'm going to keep going through this thread in a moment. Okay. James, I'm concerned that it could, or Jake, concerned it could lead to online extortion too. Kind of reminds me of Ashley Madison Bridge. I think that comes, so apparently there's, and it's not in this thread here, but there is allegedly a second incident related to this where a bunch of DMs have been leaked. I think the extortion risk comes if there have been things said online to the point about this defamation comment in the news before. If you can tie an individual to defamatory comments and then people start extorting them, I would imagine that's one of the greatest risks. All right, moving through his thread. What else is in here? TApp, this is a Reddit tweet. TApp users on Reddit are furious because their photos are now being spread around behind their backs. Unbelievable level of hypocrisy. Now, this was sort of one of the obvious observations that came out of this, where if people have signed up for this service and provided their photos, to then share the photos of other people without their consent, to now be upset that your photos are being shared without your consent. I do think that that is oversimplifying it, because I'm sure that there are many women that use this service that did not upload people's photos, and they might have used it for very reasonable purposes, but inevitably there are many that did as well. So you can see the irony of the entire thing. Now, as I said in this thread, there are no email addresses, so this is not a have I been pwned candidate. It's more just data breach observations, as we're doing now. One of the, I guess, inevitabilities that came out of it is someone has created an app or a website here that appears to be called T-Spill, where you get to rate the photos of the women that have been uploaded. Which, you remember Hot or Not? Was that late 90s? And you would rate people. And remember Zuckerberg did the same thing before Facebook. Like, it's, maybe there's just one of these things in society that will just always keep coming up. And it's like, on the one hand, I get to see the comedy aspect of it when viewed through the lens of, well, this was for people to talk about other people in a non-consensual way, and now your data is being used in a non-consensual. I don't think it makes it right. It's just a fascinating outcome from this. Now, there were people who then said this is not a hack because the images were publicly available. That's not right. Like, that's not right at all. This is sort of the final tweet in my thread here. You don't require something like SQL injection, for the sake of argument, for it to be a hack or a data breach. Any data that's used in a way it was not meant to be, or obtained in a way, or exposed in a way, or available to an audience that's not meant to be, is considered a breach. If you leave a USB stick with customer data in your car and someone steals it, that is a breach. Is it a hack? It's not the point. It's still a breach. James says, I know people that do online dating. Often they meet at a public place in the beginning. Yep, that seems sensible. Some don't even use real names in the beginning. And again, I can understand that. Yeah. That's wild, isn't it? Anyway, so that's T. Where it did get a bit interesting, if I look at the thread I linked to here about this T-Spill app, I think somewhere down here, when people are rating photos in there, yeah, this is where you see there are also a bunch of men, which is kind of funny. I don't know what the point was. What were they trying to do? But it just descends into this kind of like nasty 4chan-y expected kind of behavior of derogatory comments, especially, I would assume, from young guys towards women. And then that's not good. And it's just layers of clusterfuck. That's what this feels like. All right. It's actually starting to get frustrating. Let's go on to something different. This was fun. I haven't spoken about this yet. publicly. This will be news to everyone. Someone tried to shake me down for $30,000. Now, let me explain. This really, really did not work out well for the guy. I have spoken at length about, I'll just find the email thread here, about beg bounties. Beg bounties being a deliberate play on the word bug bounty. I'll find the thread. Here we are. In that, instead of it being, like, I love the idea of bug bounties. I'm very supportive of bug bounties. I particularly love the idea of using the likes of Bug Crowd or HackerOne, where they're managed bounty programs and there's structure and formality, and you get lots of people looking for your bugs and reporting them. I love this idea. Fantastic. A beg bounty is when someone outside of any published bounty program gets in touch with you and they're like, hey, I found a vulnerability in your site. If you give me money, I'll tell you what it is. And then you push them a little bit and you're like, look, we don't have a published program. I literally have a security.txt that says that. Links through to my story about beg bounties. And then you find it's missing SPF records or too permissive SPF records, or there are cipher suites enabled in your TLS that someone ran through SSL labs and it came up with a B grade. It's just dumb stuff like this. They're highly automated, where people are just using freely available tools to scan the internet in ways that we would normally use these tools to do legitimate things, and then they're just doing outreach, trying to ask for money, begging for money. This happens all the time. And for the most part, I can spot them immediately because I've seen so many of them. And when they ask about bounty programs, etc., I normally just go, what does the security.txt tell you? Now, any legitimate researcher is going to look at that and then give me a good response. The beg bounty hunters, they're always just, well, they usually don't say anything. This one's interesting, though. Now, this person identifies themselves and links to their LinkedIn profile. I'm not going to name them because this ended up being extremely embarrassing for them. They are from South America. And I only say that because what's a good South American name? We'll call him Juan. Let's say it's Juan. Not real name. So Juan sends me this email. Now this was 5 days ago. Dear Mr. Troy Hunt, my name is Juan, and I'm a great admirer and follower of your excellent work with Have I Been Pwned. I believe your service is of invaluable worth to global digital security and the protection of millions of people's data. I'm honoured to have the chance to communicate with you directly. Now, two things strike me here. Number one, this is very personalised. This is not just the standard generic generated beg bounty message, which they've then sent to gazillions of people. And number two, it is way too perfectly worded. And immediately after that sentence, I was like, this is AI generated, or at least very heavily AI influenced. And as I read the rest of this, we're going to go through this whole thing. It's long, but it's a good ride. As I read more of it, it was like, this is very, very clearly AI. Recently, in my research and leveraging my knowledge as a recent graduate in computer engineering with a focus on cybersecurity, I identified a critical vulnerability, in bold, in HIBP. This flaw allows a malicious actor to access sensitive HIBP data without the need to consume your API. Now, as soon as I read this sentence, I had a pretty good idea what this was. I'm going to finish this paragraph, then I'll explain. I believe the potential impact of this vulnerability, if exploited, could be devastating, resulting in incalculable damage to HIBP's reputation and user trust, in addition to significant legal and financial implications. That sounds bad. A flaw of this magnitude, providing unrestricted access to crucial data, is, now we're going bold again, considerably more severe than a high-impact XSS. The fair value for such a discovery, referenced in various bug bounty reward tables, also bold. Why is it bold? Such as those published by platforms like HackerOne or Bug Crowd for critical vulnerabilities involving privilege escalation or unauthorized access to sensitive data. You've missed, this sentence doesn't even make sense, AI. The fair value for such a discovery can be referenced in various bug bounty reward tables, such as those published by platforms like HackerOne for critical vulnerabilities involving privilege. We haven't actually said what the fair value is. We get to the value. So it's very sensationalist in terms of incalculable damage and legal issues and reputation and everything. But I'll read this sentence again, the one that immediately made me think what it is. This flaw allows a malicious actor to access sensitive HLBP data without the need to consume your API. Now, first of all, we don't have sensitive data. We do not have any data that meets the legal definition of sensitive data. If they said they could somehow get some card data out of Stripe, which is the only place we have card data, even though it's like partial card data, that we can even see, we can't get any usable card data. There's nothing there that makes the definition of sensitive. None of the source data breaches themselves go into the online service. They're all in cold storage offline. It clearly wasn't related to that. So the way I read this is someone is figuring out how to consume the API without paying for it. And I know that the unified search API that sits on the front page, so this is when you go to the front page, put your email address in. If you look at the dev tools, when you click submit, you'll see there's a request to /unified search /path. We have a balance there that we try and strike around stopping the bots from consuming that API directly and making it usable for humans. And we use Cloudflare Turnstile for that. I've written about it extensively. We've done loads and loads of tweaks to try and get that right balance. I know there are occasions with certain techniques where people can make requests in addition to the one that they should be. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about it because that's just one of the areas where we do have a little bit of secret sauce about how we manage that. I was sure straight away this is what it was. So I got this, in the afternoon on Sunday. I'll reply to it tomorrow. I'm not even that concerned about it. Anyway, it goes on. I propose an ethical disclosure agreement wherein I would provide all technical details for the reproduction and remediation of the bug. My proposal includes full and detailed disclosure, also bold, of the vulnerability with exact reproduction steps and technical guidance for remediation. Assistance, in bold, in verifying the fix if needed. In exchange, and considering the severity and potential damage avoided, I request a financial compensation of $30,000 the expensive ones, not the Australian ones. $30,000. I'm confident that this amount, besides being fair, given the scale of the flaw, would not only change my life, but also that of my wife and my 3 children, helping us achieve greater security and stability. You dickhead. Like a cornerstone of your valuation of the vulnerability is it would make your wife and kids happy. You absolute muppet. That's point 1. He wants 2 things. Point 2, public recognition on your LinkedIn profile, acknowledging my ethical discovery and valuable contribution. The bit about public acknowledgement for ethical behavior is right next to, can I have 30 grand for my wife and kids? I'd like to share a bit more about my background. I was a world champion at and then I'll not say the conference just in case someone can resolve his name from that, where I had the opportunity to represent my project. Currently, I'm developing a fully no-code automation platform, and the patent recognition process is already underway. As a recently graduated engineer with a strong passion for cybersecurity and innovation, I'm actively seeking opportunities that allow me to apply and expand my skills. You can learn more on my LinkedIn profile, actual link. Should this proposal not be accepted, I want to assure you that I will not disclose the vulnerability to any third parties. My primary objective is to ensure the security of the HLBP and its users in an ethical and responsible manner. Doesn't really seem to be his primary objective, does it? If that was your primary objective, you'd say, hey, here's what I found. You wouldn't say, can I have $30,000 and a reference on your LinkedIn profile? By all accounts, I should actually be referencing the guy by name, but I won't do that. I don't think that'd be good for him. I'm available to discuss this proposal and demonstrate the vulnerability in a secure and controlled environment. Why do you need a secure and controlled environment for a turnstile bypass? You can contact me directly via WhatsApp phone number. Thank you immensely for your attention, and I look forward to your prompt response. Well, he did get a response. A little comments first. Aaron's asked my thoughts on the Online Safety Act. I'll come back to that. I want to finish with this Muppet first. Have I been pwned comes up with A+. I assume you just run that through SSL Labs. Yeah, because Cloudflare wraps up all the SSL, which is fine. You'll probably see there's one or two cipher suites there. It suggests could be deprecated. Cloudflare manages it all. I'm fine with that. You can tell it's AI because the sentences waffle on and instead of getting to the point straight away. Yeah. And as Adam says, adding in a heartstring tug at the end. The only thing is missing is a time deadline. Right, so where do we go from here? I won't read my whole response. But here's how it started. I said, as a recent graduate in computing engineering, let me give you some advice. Approaching someone in this fashion is highly unprofessional. Despite the politeness of what I suspect is a heavily AI-influenced message, the undertone is threatening and demanding. You've exaggerated whatever it is you've found. We do not store sensitive data in HIBP that could otherwise be accessed via the API. Requested an extraordinarily, my emphasis this time, large sum of money, and then wanted public recognition for it. You've leaned on deliberately sensationalist terms to exaggerate the consequences, incalculable damage, and significant legal and financial implications, to name just two. And you've withheld any actual details despite claiming your primary objective is to ensure the security of HIBP, which clearly it isn't. What especially pisses me off, is what I said to him, is I will read the whole thing. Over the decades, I've done hundreds of disclosures of genuinely serious vulnerabilities and never requested a cent. And because of messages like yours, it can be extraordinarily hard to get the attention of breached companies. Organizations are so used to receiving shakedowns for money, often for benign security findings, that genuinely important disclosures are often discarded with the junk. I've written about this problem before in detail, beg bounties link. As an industry, I'm going to read the whole thing because I think it's good. As an industry, we have a standard way of communicating our policies around bug bounties, and it's via the security.txt file, link. In there, you'll find the following. This is what's in mine. If you find something awesome, then I'd love to send you some stickers and a personally 3D printed Have I Been Pwned logo. But if you just run some automated tooling, found something trivial, then reached out with the expectation of cashing in, you're going to be disappointed. I suspect you've merely found a bypass to Cloudflare's anti-automation protection on the unified search endpoint, which does occasionally happen and is expected. If that's the case, and you'd like to contribute to improving the web for everyone by providing the details to Cloudflare, that's great. If it's something else you'd like to do, as you've said, ensure the security of Have I Been Pwned, then please provide the details and I'll send you some stickers. But let me reiterate, withholding vulnerability details and demanding any sum of money when no published bounty exists is not ethical, is not responsible, and is a very bad look for you. Trust me, you do not want this behavior linked to your IRL identity. If you're genuinely a great admirer of my work, you'll take this feedback seriously. And I thought that was a very good message. And then suddenly the tone changed. I have 4 follow-up emails. And I won't go through them all, but this is what the tone changed to. I apologize. It wasn't my intention. I never wanted to pass anything on. I just wanted to receive my contributions and to be recognized one day. I think I got a little carried away by the AI. So I'm nailing this. I do want to contribute to HIBP. It is an honor to be talking to you. I'll read your recommendations. I didn't know that. Honestly, your recognition would be worth much more than the 30,000. Probably not, but anyway. I want to be an ethical hacker like you, and I will never approach anyone like that again. My sincere apologies. I'll explain the details. He has then gone on to send a POC, which is exactly what I thought it was. And it is something that is known and of very limited effectiveness. And I won't go into any more detail than that. But yeah, he's gone on to say, look, I just graduated. I'm having trouble finding a job. I'm just trying to make money. And yeah, where did it end? I will read this bit because this bit, I don't know if this was sad or funny. You can be the judge. I just want to share a little of my story with someone as important as you. My life is very difficult and I can't find a job in technology. I did some reports that people said were AI hallucinations. Everyone laughed at me saying I gave away the whole cake. They took my solution and are making money off of me, working for free for big companies while my children go hungry. Now that my wife knows what I did, for example, she'll hate me for delivering the solution and not charging anything. If stickers come, she'll go crazy, calling me an idiot instead of using... Definitely not AI generated anymore, is it? Calling me an idiot instead of using the system and selling the thing I gave away for free. I know I did the right thing, but everyone around me doesn't understand. Companies don't hire the demand experience. Yeah, well, mate, this is what we all go through at the beginning of our careers. But we don't all try taking people down for 30 grand. So, that was that. I sent some details onto Cloudflare. I'm quite sure it is nothing that they don't know already because we spoke about this precise thing before. And really the bigger picture here is we are trying to create systems that let the humans in and keep the bots out. And they don't have to be perfect at either. We have scenarios where bots, again, to limited effectiveness, without going into too much detail, are able to make requests to the API that we would like to stop. They're requests of no impact because we literally make that available via a published API. And we have instances where people get a Cloudflare challenge, real humans, when they shouldn't. And we almost on a daily basis, we are tweaking this to try and get that right balance. So for Juan over here and his crap, he has literally found things that are the precise behavior that we expect from the service. So, where are the comments here? Aaron sort of knows the SSL or TLS, if you have nailed down to A+, then users with old devices that don't support TLS 1.2 and 1.3, they won't be able to use the service. Yep, that's correct. That's how it works. We eventually have earlier versions of it. Yeah, I mean, for example, there is no more SSL support. SSL 3 died with Heartbleed 11 years ago. There is no more support for that. There were probably, as we started dropping support for that, there were devices that died. I was working at Pfizer at the time, and I remember during Heartbleed, and we had to turn off SSL 3, we had just rolled out a lot of point-of-sale terminals in Hong Kong. The point-of-sale terminals did not support TLS. They all communicated over SSL 3. Everything broke. Yes, that's what happens. It moves forward. For something like Have I Been Pwned, the number of client devices that do not support TLS 1.2 or higher would be a fraction of 1%. Acceptable loss. A bunch of the web is breaking for them anyway, so that's okay. All right, IoT light switches. This is topical because, first of all, I've spoken about this many times before, and our challenge here, pivoted very quickly from shakedowns, our challenge here is that since 2020, when COVID really hit and we got locked down and I went a little bit nuts on the IoT, we have been automating everything. Pretty much every switch in the house is an automated switch, every light switch. Lights, fans, things like that, switches you find on the wall. And the path that I took with this is to use Shelly's. Now, Shelly's are IoT relays. I've got a box of them. Look at this. These are Shelly's. Now, each one of these Shelly's is a small device that sits behind your light switch in line on the circuit. That's what it looks like. It's one of these little guys. We've got 7 different terminals on here that do things my electrician understands. In Australia, it's illegal to install these unless you're a licensed electrician. It's illegal to do just about anything with electricity other than change a light bulb unless you're an electrician, which frankly I'm okay with because I don't want to get electrocuted, I don't want to burn the house down, and I don't have time to muck around installing these because they take a lot of mucking around. Now, what I like about these is that when you install these in your house, your light switches still look the same. So if you've got nice light switches that match your decor or have a nice tactile feeling or whatever it is, and you want to make them smart, you can do it just by dropping one of these guys in behind. Now this allows you to then toggle the state digitally. The green ones like this are dimmers. So I can not only toggle the state, but I can dim them. This is the second generation Shelly dimmers. They also do power monitoring and stuff like that as well. So you can see the amount of draw from your device. They connect to the Wi-Fi network. They can also connect to Bluetooth, this second generation. They have their own little web server on them. Every one of these has an API. So you can orchestrate things directly against the API. They plug into Home Assistant with a native integration, and then I can tile that into my automation, and everything in our house is automated in that fashion. So we have multiple phases of the day that I've defined. So there's a daytime phase, which effectively turns off pretty much all the lights. Now that daytime phase starts when the weather station on the roof gets enough sunlight beyond a certain threshold. I can't remember exactly what it is. I used to do it based on sunrise, sunset, but of course the sun could rise or set and it's cloudy and you actually want more light. So by doing it based on the amount of ambient light is really, really cool. So the sun is just coming up at the moment here. We're still in morning mode. So morning mode comes on at 4 a.m. And at 4 a.m., the lights go on, the coffee machine goes on, because I get up by 5 and I want the coffee machine to be hot. It's not one of those pots. Coffee machine to be hot, so when I grind my beans and make my coffee, it goes in a hot machine. It'll do things like the lights in our ensuite will come on. So as we walk in there from the bedroom, it's like, oh, it's nice and light. When I walk downstairs, the kitchen is dimly lit. So then we go into the day phase, and then there's an evening phase. So when the sunlight drops beneath a certain percentage, the lights come on. It's awesome. It's a bedtime phase when we go up to bed to push a button. And that's the thing that also checks stuff like door locks, like are all the doors locked? All of this works really, really well. With one problem. Do I have any of them here? The one problem is I really don't like our light switches. Now you can't really see it, but just above the green Lamborghini there is a light switch on the wall. It's black. It looks good. It feels shit. What I mean by feel shit is the mechs on the buttons are just rubbish. They just feel terrible. I really don't like them. We're doing a bunch of renovations at the moment, rebuilding an entire floor of the house. Stripped it. So we had all the lights and things come off the walls, all the Shellys come out of the walls. And we're also doubling the size of the house by building onto the block next door. That's a longer term thing. That's a next year project where we're going to make decisions about lights and things. So anyway, the point is we've got to make a lot of big decisions about a very large number of switches and possibly a very large number of Shellys. At the moment, I've got about 80 Shellys, I think, in the house. So as we're going to invest into something that lasts well into the future, what are we going to do? Am I going to keep buying these and stick with these shitty switches I don't like, or go to like an IoT switch? And I found, I'm going to drop a link here in the discussion here. I found some switches, my Sparky found some switches that I really like. Smart switches. They're from a company called Zimmy, and it's a line called Sonoa. They look beautiful. You can configure things like if you have a look at the link I just sent, you can see they've got like little blue outlines around them, which is great. You can configure it so that they always stay off, or so that they're only on if the power's on, or so that when you wave your hand in front of it, they come on. You touch the switches, they're a beautiful glass front, but you touch them and you still get a tactile feedback. It feels like it's switching something. They're lovely, but I've been trialing them because I've been wanting to make them work. They're made by an Aussie company, a small company, bit worried about that because to put these consistently throughout the house, the current house, the renovation, the new stuff, is probably tens of thousands of dollars. Like it's a really, really, really big commitment. That I'm worried about just from a cost perspective. I'm also worried if it's a small Aussie company, what happens if they disappear? Yeah, the switches and stuff will still work, but what if I need more? What if I need to replace one? You can get them etched, so you can get them etched with an icon. So, you know, maybe you want an icon that's like the shower because that's the light in the shower, an icon that's a bath because it's whatever, which is really cool. These, where are they? Don't do that. they're just, I got to be honest, I don't even know what most of the switches in my house do because I automate everything and I just talk to the lady on the phone and I ask her to turn stuff on or off. The other problem they had is that they are smart switches. So rather than having, it's one of our problems at the moment. Sparky comes in. He was here yesterday, and we're changing some switches. And he pulls a faceplate off the wall. Now imagine you've got 6 switches, like a 6-gang switch, 6 buttons. You've got 6 of these on a spaghetti-like cluster of cables behind the wall, and he's got to fit all of these back in. It looks terrible, but only when you pull it out of the wall, which of course is only for like maintenance stuff. So these Sanoas, they integrate everything. So you end up with this terminal block on the back of the device where your wires go straight into there. You don't get these guys hanging around. Their IoT implementation is they Bluetooth mesh to each other, and then there is a hub which can integrate into Home Assistant, and that can expose the Bluetooth mesh. And let me rephrase that wasn't the right way of putting it. That can expose the devices. So effectively the hub abstracts the communication channel between them. It's not like there's Zigbee, for example, or Wi-Fi, like these guys. And I just felt uncomfortable with that because all of your IoT switching is then dependent on a proprietary hub using Bluetooth mesh, which is an unusual mechanism for IoT communication. These are all entirely independent. Every single one of these is its own little web server, communicates over Wi-Fi, super, super stable and reliable. These generations are. The first ones I had a bit of a problem with. And I can always write script against them. So for example, my firmware update process is I have a script which enumerates every single device on the network, and it does a firmware update check. And I can go through and update the firmware on every one using one script. I really wanted these Sanoas to work, but yesterday we got to the point where I completely pulled the pin on it, and I'll give you a few reasons why. Number one, it turns out that even if you have 6 switches, only 4 of them can actually toggle the power load. 2 of them you can then use to orchestrate some sort of automation using their native app, which is a little bit shit because I've got multiple switches with 5. So then if I can only actually tie 4 to power sources, that's a problem. And then to make it even worse, we learned yesterday that only 2 of the switches can take dimmable loads. Now, most of our lights are dimmable, and they're dimmable because I want to be able to control the mood of the room. And unfortunately, that means that every one of these instances where you have multiple dimmable switches, we're then like, well, how would you even do that? You can combine the load, so you can put, let's say I've got places where there are lights along the ceiling for visibility, but there are also lights that face pictures or things like that. They're on different circuits because I want to be able to set the levels differently. We could combine them, but then you lose that ability. You could have multiple plates on the wall, but then that looks crap because you're literally going to end up with like 3 sets of power points on the wall. And that's on top of the concerns about the IoT implementation and the Bluetooth, and then it is just one thing after another. I eventually got to the point where the reason these are so good and the reason I've got a box of like 30 of them or something here is because they abstract all that away. So you can still have normal switches on the wall. I mean, switches have been around for a long time. Light switches, a very, very simple circuit. Just make them smart with these. Really, my problem is I've just got sucky light switches. And I have not been able to find cool light switches. If anyone knows cool light switches that are dumb, that can sit in front of the smart Shelly, let me know. I think that would be my perfect scenario. Anyway, so that's where we are. So my day today with the Sparkies back around will be a significant number of those couple of dozen different Shellys are going to go in the wall. And then I'm going to have to go around one by one, join them to the network, name them, pull them into Home Assistant, tie them into the automations. I got a lot to do. Probably should stop talking, get on with that. Look at the comments here. John says, are the engraved faceplates fixed to the device, or can you just buy the plate? Good question. Yeah, it is the best possible implementation of it. They are not fixed to the device. You can take the faceplate off. What's even better about them is the way you take the faceplate off. It's not with a screwdriver. You grab it and you pull it off because it's just stuck there magnetically. So it's really easy to take it off, and then you can send it in and they engrave it. Now, of course, once it's engraved, you are committed to those icons, and I assume you just have to buy another faceplate if you wanted to then change the nature of the buttons. But yeah, that's the way it works. Which made me think of something else. This is, I've got to put it near my face because of the focus, but this is the button mechanism from the Clipsal Saturn Zen switches, which we have on the wall there. And the reason I have this button mechanism here, in fact, that's just the actual button that your finger touches. The reason I've got it here is because one of the shortcomings of this is that, as I said before, I don't know which buttons do what, which is a problem. I'm trying to, with my vernier calipers, measure and reproduce and 3D print these so I can 3D print little logos on them. And I'm hoping that eventually I can just 3D print just this piece reliably, and then I can go and 3D print my own buttons. And then I can put whatever logo I want on them. And I have to do it with a very small nozzle and a very low layer height and everything else. But if I could 3D print these, I could make my own buttons. How nerdy is that? But I think it'd be cool. Anyway, that's the plan. So, yeah, that is the way they work, John. And let me just, in the interest of time, see what else is worth reading here. John says, I do smell a Zimmy smoke alarm if after replacement. So yeah, interestingly, my Sparky said that yesterday because we had identified a different smoke alarm. I'm trying to remember who makes it. We've got one down there, which we were going to trial. And he's like, Zimmy does this as well. But once we decided that we weren't going to go with this Zimmy ecosystem, they're headquartered here on the Gold Coast, and he spoke to them yesterday, and they're like, yep, you can only have 2 dimmable loads, only 4 in total, can't use it. And we're just like, no, there's just no way in the world that's going to work. So now that we've discarded that and we're not in that ecosystem, we're going to use the, another brand. I can't remember. They're downstairs, not powered up yet. He's got to create me a lead that plugs into the socket there, and then I'll have a play today. But they are Home Assistant integratable. You know what I mean. Simon, sounds like you spend a lot of money on Sparkies. Yep. Yeah, we have spent a lot of money on Sparkies. And there are various reasons for that. I mean, they've also done a lot of networking stuff for us. We've got a lot of cameras around the house. Last week I showed the amount of really significant Ubiquiti stuff, which is still sitting here on my floor. That's an AI PTZ camera, which needs to be installed. They need Cat 6 run to wherever they go. That's been a lot of Sparky work. Obviously all the light switches and stuff for Sparky work. Just generally, if you're renovating, or particularly if you're building, there's a lot of Sparky work. And Sparkies are the most expensive trades you can find. Fortunately, we get along really well with ours. They are the one trade, I've always joked about this, the one tradesfolk that I actually want to get back. Every other trade we've had before, I've been pissed off at one reason or another. Our Sparkies are awesome. Love them to bits. And yes, we've paid them a lot of money over the years. Shirley Dev says, to help the camera focus, you can hold the thing near the camera and put your other hand behind the thing, making sure your hand blocks your face. Yeah. Anyway, if I actually manage, maybe there's an IP thing. I was going to say if I actually managed to print it or put the STL out there, but yeah, I'll show you later on. My only problem with Shelley, says James, is they don't fit well in my boxes. Yeah, now depending on your wall design, because you do have to fit them behind the wall. In Australia, I thought you were in Australia, James, maybe somewhere else. But in Australia, we don't tend to have, if you take the faceplate off the wall, there's just wall cavity behind it. We don't tend to have, I forget the word for it, boxes that sit behind it. So we've got wall cavity, but once you get 6 of these in there, I think 5's the most we got somewhere, you do start to run short on space. US is James. Yeah. Okay. So, and I have this mental picture because I've looked at so many IoT forums. Okay. The pie hole. Now, the pie hole, you realize how valuable the pie hole is when you travel and you don't have a pie hole. And often Charlotte in particular is like, why am I seeing so many ads? It's like, well, that's because we're in England or somewhere we're traveling, not because of England, you'd have the pie hole in England, but we're traveling and we're not on a network that's blocking, black holing DNS queries to nasty stuff. So the pie hole I have run, I think, for about the last 5 years now. It is free open source software that runs usually on a Raspberry Pi. Doesn't have to. I think I'm running mine on even a Pi 3. Maybe it's a Pi 4. Can't recall. I don't really think about it. I install it every now and then. I go to the web interface and there's an update, and I SSH in and I run the update, and everything just works. But my Ubiquiti network is set up for all DNS queries to route through the pie hole. The pie hole then has block lists, and those block lists come from a variety of sources, and they include domain names, which I don't want being resolved by any device here on the network that uses the default DNS resolver. And what it means is that when I go to, let's go to a trashy website, news.com.au. If I go to news.com.au now, I will see news and I'll see all these blank spaces where there would otherwise be ads. Now, here's a perfect example. And I also get a modal from news.com.au. You're missing out. Oh, hey, we get it. You want more news.com.au and you want it now. But we detected an ad blocker running on this device which impacts your experience. Please disable your ad blocker. How about fuck you? So anyway, I won't load that website. But the bits of the website I can see have got lots of white space because there's no ads. So there's a great big ad list. That gets blocked. There is a list of naughty websites. They get blocked. Now, mind you, as it relates to children, and I did see a question here, Aaron, about the Online Safety Act. Children do know how to turn off the Wi-Fi and roll back to 5G, and I'm sure that they've figured out that if that was what they wanted to look at, they can figure it out very easily. So, blocks all that sort of stuff. The joy of this, as opposed to an ad blocker extension, is I'm not installing a third-party extension on my device. I have other philosophical issues with the likes of uBlock, which I won't get into today. Every single device inherits that protection. My IoT devices inherit that protection. If they're sending lots of spammy analytics or something, and that's on a known bad domain, that gets blocked. Every now and then it breaks something. I go to unsubscribe from a newsletter and it's broken because the unsubscribed domain is the same domain as what's used for tracking of opens or something like that. So in those cases, I end up dropping to 5G normally on the device, clicking the unsubscribe link, and we're good. Anyway, it is an awesome tool. If you don't have a Pi hole already, go and get one. It's super cool, but they did have an issue. This is yesterday. Now, what seems to have happened is, like many community-centric projects like Have I Been Pwned, they have a donation facility. And you can go and donate them some money, which is great. And I encourage everyone to do that. If you use one of these products and you get value from it, like chuck them something. And I feel bad for not having done it until yesterday, actually, now that I think about it. Their donation service, let's actually get all the right words here. The right words are important. Their donation service is run via a WordPress plugin. And that plugin, unfortunately, appears to have had somewhat of a vulnerability. Now, this plugin is, again, let's get our names right here. It's from Impress.org, and I think it's GiveWP is the WordPress plugin. And GiveWP, unfortunately, appears to have leaked the addresses of other donors in the source code. Now, I haven't looked at exactly what the fix was for that, but I mean, we almost come back to this T thing, you know, the T for women thing, where obviously it's just some egregiously bad flaw that is leaking data that should have otherwise been protected. So unfortunately for the folks at the Pi hole, due to no fault of their own, they've had their subscriber data leaked. And it's kind of, it's a little bit ironic too, right? Because people use the Pi hole for privacy. So to then have a situation where your personal data is leaked is extra, I don't know, it would inevitably sting the folks there. And I'm sure that they must have had that heart and mouth moment where they're like we've actually had a data breach of our customers. Now, it looks like folks figured this out because people with email addresses that they had only used for the Pi-hole were getting spam. Now, this is also a wonderful way of getting early notification or an early alert for a potential breach of a service. And I get people email me this all the time. One of the ways I verify data breaches is there will inevitably be some people in there that have used a service-specific email address. Either they've got a catch-all domain, and for argument's sake, they've got the Pi-hole at mydomain.com, or they're using subaddressing. They're like John plus the Pi-hole at gmail.com. So that has been the early indicator of compromise. And the folks at the Pi-hole have then managed to trace it back to a published vulnerability from GiveWP. Now, GiveWP's response so far has left quite a bit to be desired. Let me have a look at the thread here. I'll drop this into the chat as well. So here's the GitHub issue. Where is it? Chat. Bam. Now this is only 2 days ago too. As of now, it was yesterday morning I got up and saw this thread. They've figured it all out. Folks from GiveWP have basically concluded here. I don't want to put words in their mouth because this is, I'm not happy with the way they've done this, but let's see here. Someone here, we're actively working to reply your ticket. To reiterate, there's no evidence that the exposure of emails that happened here has been linked to any real world exploit. I haven't read that bit before. Let me read that again because this is shit. There's no evidence that the exposure of emails that happened here has been linked to any real-world exploitation. Now, you hear this all the time after the data breach where someone's like, yeah, we got breached, but as far as we know, no one's abused it yet. That's a shit answer. That is an absolute shit answer. We take it very seriously, except for the bit that he just said. Same day patch from when we were alerted and are working on communication now. Now, they fixed it quickly. Good on them for that. The Pi-hole has taken that patch. I did confirm with them before donating. You have patched it. The last message in the thread here, Jason the Adams, has said, this conversation is starting to become needlessly accusatory, which is counterproductive. You probably feel like you're being accused because of the way you handled this. No one wins, and our team only becomes distracted by these sorts of comments. As such, I would appreciate everyone to consider this topic closed. Now, when he said consider it closed, they actually closed it. Where were we? Consider this topic closed. Let's take our time and energy to go make new, amazing things of value. Further confronting comments and or issues will be deleted. Not out of spite or anger, but a desire to move on to bigger and better things. You need the AI that Juan had earlier on because you could have done a much better job of this message. Like it's just a shitty message. When you have a breach, as I have had when my MailChimp list got phished, humility is really key. Owning your problem, accepting the feedback, not a marketing spin, which is what it feels like. There are 17 downvotes on that comment. There are now 18 downvotes on that comment. It's just, yeah, it was very, very poorly done. It was very poorly handled. And obviously, there's been many different organizations impacted by this. The Pi-hole is just one that is using this particular WordPress extension plugin. So anyway, in conclusion, Pi-hole good, GiveWP bad. Go and use the Pi-hole and go and give them a donate. Even if it's only a couple of bucks. Again, like running services for free for the community as well. When I see a couple of bucks come in, there's more to it than just the money. You know, the money's nice as well, of course, but the fact that someone is willing to take the time to show their appreciation. All right. Uh, I will comment really quickly, Aaron, because I've been going for an hour, 20 minutes, and I need to take children to school in a moment. So the Online Safety Act, inevitably we're talking about the UK situation where won't somebody please think of the children, which is why we should force everybody to identify themselves when they want to look at the adult things. This is not just a UK thing. There's a lot of momentum gathering in continental Europe around this. There's a lot of discussion in other parts of the world that boil back down to verifying identity and a component of that being age. In Australia, later this year, we will have social media laws kick in that require you to be 16 to use social media. So my 13-year-old daughter is not very happy about this because, of course, you just got all of the social things turning 13. The only way to do that is you've got to do some sort of identity verification, hopefully not in the way that T for women did. So you've got to find a way of securely identifying people who are uploading personal information or otherwise verifying themselves via some sort of identity service, of which we don't have good centralized privacy-centric ones unless they're run by the government, which then has all of these other issues as well. So the bit about the UK effectively, I mean, I was going to say banning porn for under 18s. You need to be an adult anyway, but the concern I have is that you're taking a methodology which worked IRL back in the day and applying it to the internet, i.e. IRL. I would imagine, honestly not having done this before, but if you walked into a newsagent's and you looked 15 and you picked up a nudie mag and you go to the counter and pay for it, someone might ask you for ID. Someone should ask you for ID. Now that's one thing. To try and take that paradigm and put it on the internet simply doesn't work for all sorts of good reasons. Where do you begin? VPNs is number one. And there has been a massive uptake. Go and look at Google Trends for VPN in the UK. Trends.google.com. It's fascinating. It's just like straight through the roof because suddenly people are like, screw this, man. Like, I want to get my porn without having to provide information to the government. That's not necessarily people who are under 18. It's loads of other people who don't want to have an identity associated with that service for obvious reasons. So VPNs are a big thing. I made the point, I've got a thread there somewhere, where if you've got kids, turn this off first because I don't want to like give away the secrets here. But if you go to Google incognito, maybe with your VPN, and you search for porn, it's everywhere. There's obviously lots of it on social media platforms as well. There are so many ways to get it. And what we're seeing now is that the biggest, like Pornhub, are now implementing this government guidance because they want to be able to still have customers from there. And there's all these others that aren't. And there's a lot of stuff which is inevitably not going to adhere to the law or not going to have the highest standards which Pornhub, for example, would have. And I say that simply because they are so big. They're obviously the biggest target. We've seen them do things like no longer provide their services to certain states in the US after the same sorts of requirements come. So people either just use other websites or they VPN. I think that the thing that I just find fascinating is it is so easy to accidentally stumble across porn, let alone if you're out there consciously looking for it. And ideas that you can somehow verify someone's identity and verify that they're a certain age and that now it's okay, it's just, it's ludicrous. And the messaging coming from politicians and the community alike on this, some of these messages are just dumb. Okay, who's this? Jessa Sato, MP. I've quoted her in the start of the thread here. She said, well done to everyone who campaigned to ensure age verification for pornography was in the Online Safety Act. Today it comes into force. And while no doubt there will be some who get around it, you reckon? It means your kids in particular won't be stumbling on, and then there's a screen grab of Pornhub. Yes, your kids will still be stumbling on porn. My approach to this is, as a parent, my approach to this is that there's obviously some basic technical controls you can do. We just spoke about the pie hole. I'm fine having the pie hole block this sort of stuff. I'm very conscious of how easy it is to circumvent that. I spend a lot of time with my kids on devices and talking to them about stuff like this. they're not going to stumble on anything that they don't know already exists. I honestly don't know what they've seen. I've certainly never caught my 15-year-old son, for example, looking at this sort of stuff. But we have conversations around it. And it's not like he's magically going to turn 18 one day and then suddenly it's all fine, and then the day before that it's not. This is something that they need to be educated about from a young age. And I feel, as others have said in the comments as well, that there's a distinct lack of parenting in a lot of these cases as well. So, look, I think the trend globally is identity and age verification for an increasingly large array of services, not just porn, but YouTube has been rolled into our social media act that comes into effect later on. So apparently you're going to need to be 16 to watch YouTube, or at least do some sort of identity verification. And I think this is just generally the trend that we're heading towards. And a lot of it won't do anything. And we can all speculate about whether there are other government incentives to do that. All right. I'm going to start wrapping this up in a moment. Aaron said we're getting it for Spotify. It's getting nuts. Yeah, well, there are some naughty words on Spotify, some of which I've said on this podcast today. Yeah, I mean, VPNs. James says, if we could trust them to delete the verification data and only retain a flag, the account was verified, this wouldn't be a problem. Yeah, I don't know. I still don't like it. Aaron says, I signed up to Twitter just to follow Troy and got 3 girls sending me links to adult websites within an hour. Yep. Welcome to the internet, mate. John says, is there a register of approved verification firms? Else opens the door to cheapest bidder gets the job. And then we're back to the T app with identity docs floating around the web. Yeah, and this is the concern, right? The concern is to reliably do identity verification, you've got to provide documentation. That documentation is what we use for identity verification, which then puts us at other risks. I hate to say it, and people will hate me for saying it as well. The best way we can do identity verification without creating additional risk of leakage of this sort of material is a government-provided service, because the government already has all of our identity data. Now, all we need to do then, and I'm trivializing this, all we need to do is have a reliable way to identify ourselves to a government service. It's a little bit like our unified search on Have I Been Pwned and Old Mate Juan before. This doesn't have to be perfect either. We do not have to get this right every single time, particularly for things like access to adult content. But government-issued service is unfortunately the most likely way of us being able to do that in a privacy-preserving fashion. And as James says, I bet a lot of people will be using free VPN, and we know how safe those are. Yeah. Look, I still use NordVPN. I did have a commercial relationship with them. I don't anymore. I still use the service. I think it's very good as a VPN. I just think there's a lot of stuff you don't need a VPN for. And I don't think you should have to have a VPN for accessing Twitter or something like that. It's just nuts. James says, Troy's in Mastodon. I never get spammed there. Yeah, that's because there's no one there, mate. Sorry, there's just not much happening there. Or it's just people complaining about Twitter. All right, folks, I'm going to wrap it up there. This is a very long weekly update, and I've got a gazillion things to do today, including joining a heap of these Shelleys to the network and geeking out on the IoT. Thanks, folks. See you same time next week.